Welcome to the committee. Thank you so much for being here. If you could just start off by introducing yourself and then proceed with your testimony.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Dunker. I'm from Jackson, Minnesota.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you wouldn't mind just seating, only because you'll be closer to the microphone then and people will be able to hear you better.
My name is Charlie Dunker. I'm from Jackson, Minnesota, and I'd like to tell you the MNSure story of myself, my wife, and my 3 kids. My story really starts in 2007. My wife had breast cancer. Got it early. She was fine, did chemotherapy, everything went good. It was an aggressive cancer, but we got it early, so everything was good. Well, every year after that, our insurance kept going up. So to offset that, we would raise our deductibles. Till in 2013, we got to the point of $1,200 a month insurance and a $8,000 deductible. Well, the Affordable Act came up, and it was like, wow, this is great. So my wife got online and got in there, got a profile. Well, the MNSure website was always down. That was the first thing. She would get halfway through her profile, and then she'd say, this thing crashed, and I have to start over now. So finally she got her profile, got the online profile through MNSure. We filed for insurance assistance for Brittany. We have 2 older children, Brittany and Taylor, and then Sam is our 13-year-old, and he was our only dependent. Well, in February of this year, we got a letter from our Human Services to apply for retroactive health care going back to January 1st. My wife completed this, filled it out, sent it in. Well, in March, we still had no insurance cards. So my wife calls Human Services, and they said, well, Sam's covered through medical assistance, but you and your husband are going to have to go online and apply that way. They said, MNSure will be getting a hold of you and letting you know how to do this. And they said, if they haven't done that in a week, get a hold of us. It was about 2 days later, we get a packet in the mail from MNSure. It had an application in it with my son Sam, his name on it. The other application was blank. My wife filled them both out. Her assumption was that they sent this because their sister, their website was always down, so they must just be taking this on paper for. Filled them out, sent them in. Well, Sam got his card. My older 2 daughters, they got all their insurance. Well, we're landscapers. Spring of the year, we were busy, didn't really think about it. And finally Gail one day said, you know what? I'm really short of breath lately. She said, I've got an oncology appointment coming up. She said, in first part of July. She said, I need to go to that. She said, I got to call MNSure and see where these insurance cards are. I believe this was probably around the 1st of June. So she calls MNSure, and we find out that we needed to go online, that paper application wasn't good enough, and we didn't have insurance. Well, honestly, the first thing we thought is, you know what? We're just going to go down to our local insurance. It's going to be expensive, but we'll just buy insurance. Not realizing open enrollment didn't mean that you couldn't just go through MNSure. You couldn't buy insurance at all. So, and we had, I do need to go back, but we had gotten a letter from MNSure telling us that Gail and I would have coverage and that our premium was 0. We have a letter that says that. But no, you didn't send in the right form, so we don't have insurance. So Gail went to her oncology appointment. We're just paying out of pocket at this point. Well, she went there, and her oncologist tells her that, I think you just have a virus. You're all right. If this is still a problem in a couple weeks, go see your regular doctor. So by now we're getting into August, and she's still not feeling right. So she goes to her regular doctor. He does chest x-rays again. He says, you know, I don't see anything, but he said, I'm going to have the radiologist look at it just to make sure. He said, obviously, there's something going on here. So the radiologist looks at it and says, you've got a small nodule up here in your upper right lung. He said, we need to do a CT scan. So we do a CT scan, and we're paying this all out of pocket. Did that, and they said, no, you've got some spots on your lungs here. There's something going on. You need to go down to Sioux City and see your oncologist. So down to Sioux City we go. Well, we get down there, and they tell us, they start looking at her, and it's like, boy, you need this test, and this test, and this test. And we told them, we don't have insurance. We're still fighting with MNSure. Go home. You're out of here. Nothing we can do for you. You get your insurance thing figured out, you come back. So we had filed an appeal. Went through all that. Gail went through the appeal. She said, you know what, that appeal went good over the phone. She said, I explained what had happened. We'd sent in our application. And she said she felt good about it. Well, about 2 weeks later, we get a letter from MNSure, and I open it. I'm reading this appeal, and it goes through all the steps Gail had done, everything she'd done. Add your online profile, filled out your application, filled them in. Our application and Sam's got sent in the same envelope. Sam got his parts, got insurance, we did. Went through all this telling us, and the very last sentence it said something about how MNSure really hadn't done anything wrong, so I affirmed their decision. And I'm not kidding. I thought, don't I know what affirm means? I got out a dictionary and looked it up because it's like, this isn't right. How can I go through and tell all the steps we did and then say they did nothing wrong? So I take it into Gail. I said, here, read this. And she said, what's it say? I said, well, I'll just read it. And she reads it and she says, I'm denied. So then what do we do? What do we do then? She starts emailing L. Franken, Mark Dayton. Let's see, L. Franken sent back a form letter, 5 sentences long, that said, sorry, your appeal to MNSure was unfavorable, but there's nothing I can do for you. Mark Dayton called us and told us that there was a free clinic in Mankato we could go to. That was the help we got. So we're down to our local insurance agent, went to her, it's like, what can we do? She said, this doesn't make any sense. Go back online. She said, you gotta be able to get insurance. This doesn't make sense. Go back online, and my wife said it was really strange. She said this little box popped up, went back on the MNSure website. She said it wasn't the full screen, it was just a little box, and it said, pick your plan. It said, I picked my plan, and it says, congratulations, you completed your MNSure application. Coverage starts November 1st. Premium of about $500 a month. So it's like, great, we're in there. This is October, we're in now. So my wife goes to a regular doctor. He's like, good, we'll get you up to Rochester, get this taken care of. So we have an appointment in Rochester on November 4th. Now we get there, and still haven't gotten our insurance cards. Gail calls MNSure. They give us I forget, an ID number, something like that. They said, well, I'll give them this. We don't have your cards yet. We get to the Mayo Clinic, and we go through billing. And by the way, we have already paid premiums for the preferred one. Preferred one said, no, you're in our system. We passed your checks, and you're good to go. We get there, and they said, well, you don't have a card. Well, we'll call MNSure and see what your insurance number is. MNSure says they don't have insurance through us. That one lady said, I don't know why this person keeps calling us. She doesn't have insurance. Mayo says, I have a letter here saying their insurance starts November 1st. They've paid premiums. Well, they shouldn't have that letter. Mayo Clinic says, this isn't like she's standing in the line at the grocery store. She's sick. She needs her insurance. She doesn't have insurance. There's nothing we can do for her. Well, once again, we paid our $150 or whatever to go see a doctor, and we go up there, and Gail is sick by this point. I took my mother's oxygen tank with us because she couldn't breathe. Go up there, and the doctor's like, boy, you need all these tests. You need whatever it was. We told him our story, and he said, well, you're going to have to go back through billing. So we go back to billing. So she rings it up. She says, well, that'll be $17,000. So can I make payments on this, or how's that work? No, you have to pay this all up front. So I called my mom. My mother gave me $17,000 so I could get these tests for my wife. So we go back to our motel. This was a Tuesday. Thursday we were supposed to have the test. So we're sitting in the motel on Wednesday. My wife is getting sick, really sick. She can't breathe. So finally it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, Gail, I think we need to take you to the emergency room. I actually called my brother-in-law and said, what do I do? She's dying. He said, take her to the emergency room. They can't refuse her there. So we take her to the emergency room. Well, I said, Gail, we need to go to the emergency room. She said, yeah, I think you're right. She said, you're going to have to help me. So I get her off the bed. We start getting her coat on. We start walking down the hall. She collapses in the hall. She can't breathe. I call 911, get an ambulance there. They haul her to Mayo, and then they pumped 2 liters of fluid off her lungs, another liter of fluid off her heart. Then she could breathe again. And they did all the tests that we've been trying to get for months. Did all those tests in the emergency room, and they said, well, your lungs are full of cancer. You got cancer on your bones. You have cancer around your heart. It's like, wow, okay. And I said, this isn't good. So they keep her at Mayo for a week. We were there from a Wednesday to a Wednesday. And they said, we're going to let you go home. We still didn't have our insurance. Gail would get a phone call every day from Mayo Clinic saying, today you owe us $40,327. The next day it'd be $50,000. So they said, no, we're going to send you home. She'd been there a week. We're going to send you home. We'll start the chemo on Monday. We didn't want to go. We said, are we going to get back in this door after we leave? They said, no, Mayo isn't like that. You can go. So we go home, and they say, I'd go to a regular doctor, have a physical. So we did that on Friday. We get home Friday afternoon. They said, we'll call you when to do the chemo. When we're going to start the chemo on Monday. Well, Friday afternoon, they still had to call. So Gail calls him up and said, hey, I'm supposed to have chemo on Monday. Well, you're supposed to call me and tell me what time to be here. And Mayo says, sorry about that. You're going to have to go back through billing before we can schedule that. I told Gail, I said, you know what, we're going. I said, we're going to end up on the news if nothing else because you're going to die if we don't. Well, by Sunday, her lungs had filled back up with fluid, so I ran her back to Rochester, and we went back through the emergency. After we did that, our Human Services Director in Jackson got her declared disabled. Once we took her income off our income, then we both could get Medicaid, and now the government can pay for it all. Well, she was in Mayo from November to January 9th when she died. That's my MNSure story. One thing I'd like to show you. That is my wife in May of 2014. That is my wife and family on the day she died. 6 months. 6 months, that's what happened. Well, MNSure was jerking our chain. That's what happened. That's why I'm here. I said, this story has to be told.